Okay, welcome back. I am back and I did double check. I did this a while ago, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't remember exactly, but yeah, I did make sure. So I just double checked it now that that was all I see in here, about the feasts of spring. Okay, so I believe I covered everything there. And again, so Passover and unleavened bread and first fruits were sometime in, um, it would be like, March, April in there. And then Pentecost could be May, June, depending, somewhere in there. Like that range I went over in the last video. It coincides, of course. So there's that. So there's spring feasts, and those are the four spring feasts. Now, for the fall feasts, I'm just going to mention where you can read about them. There are three of them, and it's I'll write them down here. Okay, I'm not going to read through them because we're focusing on the spring ones now, but for the fall ones, I'll just write them down for interested people. You can read through it, okay? So they had the three fall ones. The first one was trumpets. Okay, and this was, you could find this in Leviticus 23, verses 23 to 25, and Numbers 29, 1 to 6. Okay, and like I said, not each place talks about every feast, so it's kind of spread around like this. Okay, now we have atonement. This was the Day of Atonement. It wasn't really a feast, because they would fast. So, but it's listed this way because it's one of the seven. Okay, so Leviticus 16, all of 16. Okay, and then 23, 26 to 32. All right, and Numbers 29, 7 to 11. All right, and then the last one is tabernacles, which is also called booths. It's sort of like tents, they had a thing for this. And it's also, remember that came up in gathering? Well, this is linked to that. So this was like the end of the harvest season. Okay, so Leviticus 23, 33 to 44. And then we have, put it over here, Numbers 29, 12 to 40. And Deuteronomy 16, 13 to 17. Those are the ones for that one. Okay, so if you want to do a little research on this, do some extra credit, okay, then you can look up these. All right, and this all pertains again to the end times, because trumpets, they show up in Revelation. It's a type of that. Okay, and it shows up in trumpets in the fall of Jericho, which is a type of what happens in Revelation. Okay, so trumpets, it's about the end times. Atonement is also something in the end times. I'm gonna leave that one for when it happens. Then we have tabernacles, has to do with when Jesus returns and sets up the kingdom. And then it's sort of fellowship with God, and the tabernacle of God is among man, all this. So this is like the millennium age here. It's symbolic of that. So this all ties in to the end times and return of Jesus. So that's what that's about. In the middle, you have summer, these are fall feasts. In the middle is summer, which is the church age. This is the end of the age, okay? And these typically would be in September, October, okay? They were like middle of September all the way. This could run through the end of October somewhere towards the end. So that was the range for those. I'm not going to go over that calendar part for this, but it'll tell you, and you can work that out. That'll be your homework if you want. Work it out and tell me in the comments. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so that is the feasts. Okay, so we did that, and now I have a little bit more for this video. Wait. Okay, here, I have some notes I'm going to go over. So I will read this to you, and then this part I'm going to do in a separate video. So there are going to be 3 videos today. Ooh, okay. Now, this was a note about first fruits. Yes, when I was researching this in more detail, I wrote all this down. Some of it I said, some of it I probably didn't say, so I'm going to read it. Okay. First fruits, all right. In the Bible, it seems to be flexible according to when that time begins in that year, right? Because every year it can be a little different depending on the weather. According to tradition, they place it at the same week as Passover and unleavened bread. This could be because they were supposed to go there 3 times a year. So early spring, late spring, and again in fall. So they would also combine those 3 fall ones were done at the same time. Anyway, they were close together, I guess, enough. Maybe these weren't introduced yet because, we'd have to look at that, but not right now. Okay, so the day is celebrated on the day after the Sabbath, which was Saturday, so this would be on Sunday. So for that year, somewhere during that week, it would fall. So during the events of Holy Week, that would have made it the 17th. Okay, so in fact, if they always did the 14th, that year it was like that because that day was a Thursday, the 14th, so then the day after the Sabbath, because then the 15th is Friday, 16th is Saturday, the 17th would be Sunday, and that was the day after the Sabbath, and that was the day of the first fruits. So that year it was the 17th, but they did it the day after the Sabbath. So for instance, if the Passover would have been on like Wednesday or Monday, or the 14th of Abib would have been a Monday, then they would still have to go to the day after the Sabbath, and then it would have been Sunday would have been a day other than the 17th. But on this week, it was the 17th when all these things were fulfilled. Okay, so again, if you celebrate that, it could be another date. That wasn't a fixed date, like number date. Okay, it was just a day, the day after the Sabbath on the Passover week that they celebrated first fruits. But on the actual week these things were fulfilled in Jesus, Holy Week, it happened to be the 17th. So it was 3 days after, Okay, so anyway, enough about that. Next. So again, I wrote, Jesus is the fulfillment of all these things. He is also the embodiment of their continuation. As Christians, we commemorate these things in a new way, not the old way. People don't understand that God does change things sometimes. God has been changing and updating things since the Garden of Eden all the way through to the New Covenant, which was set up at the Last Supper, okay, and runs through till now, and till I guess, the return. So anyway, that is that. So I just wanted to mention those notes. So yeah, this next thing I don't know, I could put it in now and make this 2 videos. It isn't, yeah, it wouldn't take that long. I'll just keep going for this video, okay? I had this in categories, and that's okay. It goes together perfectly. So this is titled Holy Week Events and the Fulfillment of the Spring Feasts. Just a few more notes, okay? So in Leviticus 23, 4-17, Deuteronomy 16, 1-12. Jesus came to fulfill all these things. We will see this as we read through the events. There are also traditions that came into the Jewish culture about these holidays that are not mentioned in the Bible. So I didn't research everything and what they do now. You know, it's another interesting thing you can look at if you want. Let's see, unleavened bread. Yes, they got rid of the leaven because it was a type of sin. Okay, so they went to their homes and got rid of anything that would be seen as a sin. What it was back then that they would take out, I don't know. There are plenty of examples today that anyone could imagine, you know, if you know what would be a sin, okay? So lots of things. If you're a Christian, you want to have your home pure all the time. You don't want anything of sin sitting around at all, anywhere, okay, in your life at all, period, okay? So, yeah, serious thing here. Okay, so the custom was to cleanse their home of leaven, which represented sin, in preparation of these feasts. All right, and that, oh yeah, is another interesting reason why they're saying Jesus did this himself when he cleansed the temple of the money changers, and it was kind of a message saying that this was his house, and he did it during that time. So that's interesting. Oh, and I have that written down here, so I'm going to go over that and read that. And before I do, I'm going to mention this last point about the feasts. Oh yeah, and this thing. Okay, I'll read those 2 after that. But first I want to mention that this is another item that is absolutely dynamite. Okay, so if you're just doing something in the background, if you're drinking your tea, you might want to sit down, put it down, and listen to this, okay? Now, from the time, okay, Holy Week, you know, was like, there's some debate about, you know, the actual years, you know, back then things change a little, like they argue about the year 0, if it was 2 years this way or that way. And when we start counting, you know, that, and then, so this would be 33 AD or 30, somewhere in there, okay, but this happened from the time after the resurrection, like right away, okay, where the next, from, it says 30 to 70 AD, a 40-year period, okay, that's a significant period of time according to numbers in the Bible. So, but it started after Jesus died and rose again, okay, so right after that, immediately this started, okay, for 40 years this happened, until 70 AD, when the Romans came in and destroyed everything, the city and the temple, okay? But for those 40 years, this is what happened. There were 4 things that happened. The priests had certain things they did, right? Certain ceremonies and stuff, okay? Well, one thing was the high priest on the Day of Atonement, he would go into the temple and do certain things, okay? All right, I don't want to get into all the details, but one thing that he did was they would take a fleece, which was like a piece of wool, and it was kind of a crimson or scarlet color. And when he did his ritual, at the end, it would miraculously turn white, which symbolizes that their sins were atoned for the year, because it happened once a year on the Day of Atonement. That's one thing he did, okay? And now what happened during that 40-year period is the fleece, the wool, did not turn white. It didn't turn white, it stayed red, okay, which symbolized that that's not how their sins are forgiven going forward, okay? So this is documented in the actual Jewish historical documents of what they recorded from the priests during that time, all right? Anybody can find it, just look for it. That was one of the things. It listed 4 things. Another one was the doors of the temple would not stay shut at night. They would mysteriously open. You can just hear this creak, right, in the middle of the night. They would stay open, and they, wouldn't stay closed. They would just open up in the middle of the night mysteriously, and every night. Okay, so this represented the fact that the veil had been torn. Yeah, I know. It's really something. Another one was they had that, candelabra, the branches of candlesticks that they call a menorah, the lights on those. They had a thing like that in the temple, and at least some of them wouldn't stay on overnight, no matter what they did. Okay, and then another one was they used to do this casting lots with a scapegoat, and that just wouldn't work. It didn't work out. I don't know, forgot what the detail was, but somehow it didn't work out. So it just didn't work. All these things didn't work anymore because the old covenant was over and the new covenant had begun. And that is why. And it was all fulfilled through Jesus, and that's why. Okay, there's a new system now. The old system was over, and so that's it. And this was recorded in their own Talmud, which is kind of one of those unapproved of books. That's all I'm going to say. If you know anything about it or read it, anything in there, you'll see. Anyway, don't want to get into that here, but now we have the 2 things I will read. I should read the scapegoat one first. So this is Leviticus again, and it is 16. Leviticus 16. Ooh, it's pretty long. Okay, well, all right. The Day of Atonement. Okay, and then I'll read a little bit in some other spot. Okay, gotta fix this. Well, I'll just read it. Okay, now the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, when they offered profane fire before the Lord and died. And the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron your brother not to come at just any time into the holy place inside the veil before the mercy seat which is on the ark, lest he die, for I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. Thus Aaron shall come into the holy place with the blood of a young bull as a sin offering, and of a ram as a burnt offering. He shall put the holy linen tunic and the linen trousers on his body. He shall be girded with a linen sash, and with the linen turban he shall be attired. These are holy garments. Therefore he shall wash his body in water and put them on. And he shall take from the congregation of the children of Israel 2 kids of the goats of a sin offering, and 1 ram as a burnt offering. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house." That's because he wasn't perfect, okay? "He shall take the 2 goats and present them before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then Aaron shall cast lots for the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord, and the other lot for the scapegoat. And Aaron shall bring the goat on which the Lord's lot fell, and offer it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement upon it, and to let it go as the scapegoat into the wilderness. Okay, now actually, I don't even have to read the rest of this, because this is the part that's noteworthy here, because right then, at the time of the Last Supper and the arrest leading up to the crucifixion, this was what you saw. You had one was the offering, and one was released. And if you read that, and we'll go over it when we get there, there was one person who slipped away in the middle of, like, right after that, and kind of slipped away into the wilderness, and that would have been the scapegoat. So it's like down to the detail, these things were fulfilled. And when we read over it, you'll see, I'll remind you, of that. So anyway, that's there. It's all there, for a reason. Okay, and then, yeah, this just goes on with the details of what they did. And, as you can see, it's a whole lot of details. These things had to be fulfilled down to the minute details. It wasn't just whatever you felt like, willy-nilly, oh, well, nope. Very specific, and that's how it was fulfilled. So, anyway, this goes on. All of this is just about the Day of Atonement, to make atonement, for the children of Israel for all their sins once a year. So, okay, there's that. Now, the last thing for this video is that little thing I want to read over here. Way over here. Almost there. Okay, John chapter 2. This will be the last thing for the video, okay? It's verses 13 till 22. And I'll make this larger. So, yeah. Okay. Here. So, 13 to 22. Now, the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Okay, so this is part, I didn't put this in the other list because it was earlier. Okay, so I'm reading this now. All right. So but we'll go over that in the other Gospels anyway. So now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those who sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers doing business. Okay, so they would sell these animals for the sacrifices, okay? But they weren't doing it the right way. Okay, that's the thing. They were cheating people in the process. That was the problem. Okay, so when he had made a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overturned the tables. And he said to those who sold doves, "Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise." Then his disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house has eaten me up." So the Jews answered and said to him, What sign do you show to us since you do these things? Jesus answered and said to them, Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Then the Jews said, It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days? But he was speaking of the temple of his body. Therefore, when he had risen from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this to them, and they believed the scripture and the word which Jesus had said. Okay, so here, that was what I was saying with the cleansing the house. It ties into that with the leaven. And boy, would this be necessary today, right? In what you see, what's called the church world. Boy, I mean, I would love to do this myself. Personally, make one of these and just go to each place like this that's fleecing the flock and do this. That's where this comes from, turning the tables, like turning over the tables, because that's what happened here. And that's what they've done. It's turned into merchandising, making merchandise of you as the church. That was not God's intention at all, ever. So that is a great sin, and that's exactly what's going to happen again. But anyway, enough with that. So I don't want to get into a big thing about that, or I'll be here all day. But that is it for that. So now that's it. Next time, like I said, I'm going to pick up with the gospel accounts where we start in the events of Holy Week. I'm just going to begin a little earlier because there's it might even be that Palm Sunday was a Saturday, because if you count back, it looked like it could have been. But, I think they just put it on Sunday because that's when people go to church and you can celebrate it more conveniently. So that, I'm not sure. I have to look at that again. But we will look at all of that, all the events of that time. And that's what's coming up next time, which is what I'm going to do starting, around the 26th of March. I have certain things going on in the meantime, so I will be back then for that. And then we're just going to go, full blast, going through all of this, all the way through Pentecost, right after Easter. So that's it. Okay, that's what's coming up. And I will be back then, and you have a lovely weekend and week and all that until that time, which is only like it's about a little less than 2 weeks. I will be back then. Okay, be blessed.